Welcome to the Urban Agorist podcast, episode number 1. My name is James, and today I am joined by Landry Harmon. As always, you can find today's show notes at urbanagorist.com/1. With that out of the way, let's get straight into it. All right, welcome. This is the inaugural episode of Urban Agorist. My name is James Gentleman. I am joined by Landry Harmon, who's been helping me along with all the planning here. Landry is... the director of marketing or something like that? Is that right?
Yeah. More CMO, director of marketing, anything that makes it sound, whatever's more fancy to you.
CMO, then for sure.
CMO. Okay, CMO.
Jack of all trades. You also do a lot of just kind of the behind the scenes stuff for Thaddeus Russell's Unregistered and Renegade University.
Yep.
And you're going to be co-hosting something with him? Is that right?
Yeah. We're trying to get his Patreon set up, and once we get that, we'll have some bonus content coming out, which I'll be kind of part of. So yeah, on-screen talent, finally.
Yet another method for Thad to take our money.
Exactly.
All right. So let's see. This has been kind of a journey. We've been working, you and I have been working for, a month, maybe a little bit more to get this kind of off the ground.
Into the summer is sort of the startup phase, right?
Yeah. Actually met in person for the first time last month.
That's true. That was cool. I didn't even think about how weird it was how long it's been since we've known each other.
I know. We've known each other for years. I mean, you were still a teenager. Like you were 19?
Right. I was still, because I joined, and I guess we'll get to that later in the episode, but yeah, the Tom Woods group, I probably joined right when I was starting to graduate from high school. So yeah, I think I was still a high schooler.
Man. And so that's kind of where we met, I guess, online anyway. So it's been years because you're in your early 20s now. So
yes.
I guess we can kind of start there. So you were like in a kind of conservative Christian high school, and then what happened?
Yeah. So I kind of started in Bush era, like kind of neocon evangelical Christian. That was sort of the wavelength that I grew up in, Bible class every day, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a limiting space as far as like thinking goes, 6,000-year-old Earth, etc. But I'm very thankful for a teacher that I had there, named Mr. Parrish, and he was an Iraq War veteran, served overseas, became like many veterans, disillusioned with kind of the cause and like what are we doing over there? What is this whole thing? And sort of did a libertarian turn. I was told too young for like Ron Paul 2008, but I had him as my middle school teacher in 7th grade. And because of how small my school was, I had like 14 people in my graduating class, so very small. I got to have him as my teacher like throughout high school and middle school, and he had a major influence on me. Like in 7th grade, he's telling me about Mises and Rothbard and Ayn Rand, and so like that's kind of began my interest in libertarianism. And then as I sort of grappled with foreign policy especially was sort of a thing for me. And I sort of had a Giuliani moment, like 5 years after the fact, watching a debate clip on YouTube. So that was definitely like something as far as my major turn towards libertarianism. And then after that, it was sort of reconciling this evangelical beliefs that I was growing up in and the fact that the state, because it's like where like gay marriage was sort of still looming large before the Supreme Court case was being made. So that's like a large part of the conversation you were having in evangelical circles was this. So for me, it was just like, I didn't make sense to why people of different beliefs and different philosophies and ideologies had to, like why Christians felt they should be suppressing and oppressing people via their own hegemony via the state. Right. So it's like, I started to question the state as a tool to bring about that kind of cultural or social change. And now, funnily enough, I got to university, I got to campus, and now it's like the evangelical Christians are not the political force that they used to be, in my opinion. And now it's a different kind of religion from the left. And so I find myself in both places in a space where I think free-thinking people are struggling to find others and believe what they actually believe and say what they actually want to say. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It can feel oppressive and suppressive.
Yes.
Well, so for me, let's see. So we both grew up in the DFW Metroplex. I was in Dallas and you were in Fort Worth. I'm significantly older than you, like 15 years. Let's see. So I went to a Catholic high school, and it was not nearly as conservative as it sounds like yours was. We were,
Right.
we were taught evolution, and I remember my dad throwing a fit because he was a little bit more of a fundamentalist. Even though he like identified as Catholic, he wasn't really as Catholic as like, I guess more like progressive Catholics would have him be. But
right.
Yeah, so I guess I grew up in sort of a standard issue, like center right, fiscally conservative, socially liberal type house. So like, yeah, we were kind of homophobic and definitely pro life, but like nothing was like super duper passionate. And so, yeah, for me, it was also the foreign policy thing. After 9/11, I discovered a website called Working for Change. Actually, it's where Matt Welch from Reason got his kind of journalistic start back in the US. He was covering the Ralph Nader campaign back then, and so he was writing for them, and there were a bunch of other anti-war voices. They were mainly from the left, but even, I mean, he wasn't considering himself libertarian even when he started at Reason. So in any case, yeah, so the post 9/11 era was sort of where I cut my political teeth. Then I kind of took a turn for the strongly conservative Catholic. Back then, a conservative Catholic was also anti-war. Like, I'm guessing they probably still are largely. But being that the Iraq War was such a big thing and the War on Terror, Pope John Paul II and Benedict after him were both pretty strongly anti-war, even though they were considered far more conservative than the current Pope. So I even went kind of beyond them into this sort of subsect of Catholicism that is sort of like real into the Latin Mass and kind of old school traditional Catholicism. And so weirdly, I discovered Ron Paul and Tom Woods from this Catholic blog. Tom Woods wrote a book called How the Catholic Church built, no, it was How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. And so this blogger reviewed that book glowingly, but he said, even though he's a libertarian, I really like this book. And so this guy, this blogger, his name's Mark Shea. He was super like anti-libertarian. And then when Ron Paul ran for president, he was like, well, this guy's pro-life and anti-war. Nobody else is like that. I guess he's going to be my candidate, even though he's libertarian. So I kind of went down the Ron Paul, Tom Woods rabbit hole. God, it was so long ago. I'm like trying to remember. So I was sort of like the constitutional libertarian. Like Ron Paul was always talking about the Constitution, which I think is probably long-term a disservice to libertarianism. And the reason for that is that you have now, like the Cato Institute, for instance, is sort of the mainline libertarian organization or Reason or whatever, and they're out passing out their pocket constitutions and stuff, which, I mean, to me, the Constitution is like the foundation document for maybe not the most oppressive, but definitely the most powerful state in the history of humanity.
So I think that also, if you have a politics that is rooted in the Constitution, it's rooted in going backwards, right? It's a conservatism of some sort. Right. And to me, my favorite libertarians are sort of futurists as far as how they think that things that can be improved upon. And again, it's like there's people who do important work as far as like defending, the Bill of Rights or whatever in the court system. And while we live under this oppressive state or so on, it's good for people to do that kind of work. But ultimately, libertarian theory and libertarian thinkers, I think, should be pointing forwards rather than backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Real quick, back to my little path or whatever. Right. I heard Tom Woods interviewing Lou Rockwell once, or maybe it was vice versa. It might have been Tom on Lou's show. I don't know. It was years ago. But Lou said, I'm no fan of the Constitution, and then he went off on something about how something was unconstitutional or whatever. And that completely rocked my world. The idea that a libertarian could be no fan of the Constitution when these two things were part and parcel for me, that set me down on a whole new rabbit hole. So I discovered Rothbard. And then just here more recently, so probably 10 years or so since then, I discovered agorism, which I had heard the term, and I followed Sal the Agorist on Snapchat and Instagram and stuff, but that was mainly for the memes. And Thad, he introduced agorism in the context of Anarchapulco a few years ago, but it wasn't until I heard Pete Quinones say that he had taken the full leap into this kind of new and upcoming philosophy. And not that it's new and upcoming, but new and upcoming like in the mainstream of libertarianism. I think we're kind of all agorists now. And in 2020, you know, when you don't know what the next thing's going to be, if they can lock us down and force us to wear masks and stuff, you never know. Like, it's to me, the precedents that have been set this year are what give me complete disregard for and no hope for the political system. But back to your point about libertarians being future looking, like I think I read that Sam Konkin, the sort of developer of agorist theory, got his start as like a sci-fi fan. Like, that's where he got his sort of anti-government mentality.
Right.
And you know, I mean, the roots of libertarianism, so therefore kind of go all the way back to early 20th century, mid 20th century sci-fi.
Yeah, I think there's something there as well, is that to me, like the crypto movement coming out of Bitcoin primarily, right, was also sort of a surge of like, how can we build systems outside the predominant political structure, right? How can we, you know, rather than, you know, the Fed movement tried its best, still worthwhile, but like, what if we create our own systems outside of it, and then via competition we show people forward? And, you know, it's still in progress. That sort of also changed my thinking as well, as going to Thaddeus Russell and going to all these things, that there's some missing component towards this political variant of libertarianism, that there should be something more. I think there's something about like the culture, which is funny. It's like, I think right-wing libertarians and left-wing libertarians have sort of realized that the culture is something that they should focus on, and both have seized it in different ways. Yet to what end, I don't know. But I think the culture, so it's like, it's the part of the culture, it's part of building something outside of it, and ultimately seeing politics as a old traditional form of action. And there's new ways via technology to liberate yourself and liberate your community and liberate the world as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's almost depressing to see sort of like where a lot of people are going. Like, so you've got the LP and the people who really, really are kind of digging into the if we can just get Joe Jorgensen on the debate stage. Like, I mean, I would cringe so much. Have you seen her speak? Like, she's as a libertarian, she's great. Like, and actually, apparently she got her start in agorist like circles. I met with her, and I told her that I was an anarchist, because at the time, like, this whole agorist thing is kind of new for me. Like, I was at the LP convention 4 months ago,
right?
Like, as a delegate, and so I met with her, and she told me that you know, oh yeah, I got my start in these A3 circles back in the 80s, and I had never heard of them back, you know, at the time.
Right.
But yeah, that's sort of the old agorist logo. You still see it sometimes, like on Twitter and stuff. Yeah, I can't imagine, back to the point, I can't imagine her on the debate stage. I mean, she wouldn't get time to speak. When she did get time to speak, she would just be speaking in abstracts. She wouldn't sell the message to anybody. And that's kind of the point. Like, libertarianism isn't popular to everybody. And I think that's what libertarians need to come to grips with, is that most people aren't going to want your philosophy. They don't care about your logical consistency. They don't care that, you know, you're offering them liberty when they've got a coronavirus lurking around every corner looking to kill them.
Right. I always think, as far as in accordance to the political structure, libertarian and the libertarian position at best remains critique rather than something that can actually install like a new order, right? That like the fact that libertarians can be sort of this golden platform as far as like, oh, we've been about marriage legalization since the 70s or drug legalization, they've been on these things and these issues, and they can always kind of critique both left and right on a very principled perspective. I think that's a useful way of using those politics, but at the same time, it's just like in this crazy conversation that is happening across America, it's like, I don't think even if the libertarians had a debate stage, would that voice resonate with anyone? And as you said, it's like the H.L. Mencken thing, right? Most people want to be safe. And in this time of like terror and fear mongering from both sides, they're both playing off of that. And then, the libertarian message of sort of self-reliance and sort of freedom, I don't know that would even play well with this sort of it wowould resonate with Americans during this period. So.
Right. Or really any period. I mean, if you look back in history and you hear a lot about the right side of history, and it's almost always been the libertarian position, but you don't know that until half a century later.
Right.
Like I had never heard any criticism of World War I until my adult years. We're just now starting to hear criticisms of World War II.
Right.
And that's coming up on a century since World War II, and more than a century since World War I. So what else, what do you think of the libertarian right now?
I think it's an interesting position with everything in the Trump era. Trump has inflected greatly upon it, and I think everything right now is in flux and in reaction to Trump as a figure and the cultural zeitgeist. And to me, in my personal opinion, I think libertarians on the right have been too sucked into like Trump politics and Trump rhetoric. And that's like the thing with the sort of the battle within the LP, right? Which is like, what is the right messaging? How do we do this? Black Lives Matter versus whatever the Mises Caucus says, as far as like not having, focusing on individuals or whatever, which may, I just think it's been inflamed to see yourself as oppositional to the left. I think that's kind of like become so much so that most people are operating off the basis of beating the other side rather than really trying to build whatever you have on our side. And I don't know if that's a winning strategy, but again, I'm not that interested into political winning strategies at this point. But
it really has become more like our enemy the left rather than our enemy the state. We all know one of the easiest ways to start gaining self-sufficiency is to grow our own food. Whether you're an urban agorist living in the city or an urban agorist at heart living on your homestead out in the country, you need seeds. Unique heirloom seeds are becoming endangered. 90% fewer varieties of seeds are planted today than just 2 generations ago, and just a handful of large corporations control the majority of our seeds. Seeds are disappearing all the time, and they're being replaced by cookie-cutter varieties that are bred for profit, not for flavor, robustness, yield, and certainly not the unique needs of your garden. Whether or not you're already gardening or saving seeds, I invite you to join me at the online Global Seed Summit from November 17th through the 20th to revolutionize your understanding of seeds and the role they play in your and our collective future. To learn more about the Global Seed Summit, head to urbanagorist.com/summit. When you sign up for the Global Seed Summit, you will connect with a global community of people who are committed to a healthier future. Now more than ever, people are beginning to realize the importance of taking control of their own food-secure future. Take control yourself at the Global Seed Summit. Head to urbanagorist.com/summit to sign up today, and I'll see you there. One kind of troubling thing that I've been seeing a lot of is like advocacy for violence, not just like self-defense violence, but like taking it to the streets, summary execution of like people that they see as unsavory, that kind of thing.
Right.
And it's not even just like joking about helicopters. That started a couple of years ago, but now it's like, if I see someone doing behavior that I disapprove of X, then, a bullet to the head would be mercy. Like that kind of rhetoric is really, really troubling to me. And I don't know if it stems from Trump. Maybe it does.
I think it does. I mean, I think if you look at, there's been polls that have been done every year of the Trump presidency, obviously doesn't include libertarians, but it does include Democrats and Republicans, and how much from every year political violence is normalized amongst now we're in 2020 it was 30% and 36% for Republicans and Democrats respectively. It might have that the other way around, but that's something I think that's very worrying, right? And I think the best part of the libertarian ethos, and that's kind of what drew me to it in the first place, is that you can have a system in which people have different beliefs and different ways of life and different desires as far as how they want to realize their systems within a greater, freer structure. That's possible, right? Like you can be there's like the famous saying, you can be a socialist and the libertarian or ANCOM or whatever, right? Yeah. In a libertarian society, but not the other way around. And I think that's a big plus to the system of freedom that how libertarians have imagined it. And yeah, I think there is definitely this kind of rhetoric at the very least. I don't know if I haven't seen anything as far as action goes, but definitely rhetoric has been inflamed. But I would say that's very much just the hyper politicization during the Trump era that's just working on everybody on every side.
So do you think that that would diminish if Trump were voted out of office or after the end of his second term?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's kind of, yeah, I think at some point we have opened and played the card. We have opened the box and played the cards already, right? So the fact that this is like the lowest common denominator about how someone can act as president, right? That's sort of the case in contemporary politics now. I think, a Biden presidency will be somewhat a return to form, but yeah, the big question is, what does the right wing, what does Republicans do into response to a Trump presidency? And I don't see it easily going away from that kind of politics, because it's worked on some level. They've definitely pulled a string and touched a nerve. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's going to be the fascinating thing to watch, but
yeah. Well, and you've got,
I guess it doesn't go so way. Right.
You've got people on the left now who are saying, yeah, vote for Biden, but we know where he's going to live. Like if he doesn't give us what we want, we don't have to stop these riots and this unrest and stuff,
I think that's going to be the fascinating thing, right? Is if a Biden presidency, you get the outbreak and the breakdown rather of the left coalition, right? Because like it's very loosely unified by getting the orange man bad out. But if he is out, then what happens? And I think we're going to really see the different fractions and the breaking up of the Democratic Party in the next 4 years, if Biden wins. Yeah,
or just the establishment sort of taking over the what is today the left wing of the Democratic Party, just like with the Tea Party. I mean, the Tea Party doesn't exist anymore,
right.
Largely because of Tea Party members. I don't know if it's Tea Party members compromising on their values, or if it was just complete infiltration by would-be establishment players into the Tea Party.
I definitely think I don't know. In my opinion, I think there's something interesting about that comparison between the Tea Party movement and a woke or this kind of new leftism coming out, and it's clearly amongst my generation very popular, right? Amongst people my age, that kind of sensibility of race, these issues about what government should do. Bernie Sanders definitely formed a lot of people's thinking on that, sort of maybe how Ron Paul was to some people in your generation, right? And I was maybe on the last cusp of people that were influenced him in that way. But that's the thing that like, they're going into these newspapers, they're going to become professors, they're going to become school teachers, and they're going to become parents, these kind of like this ideology on the long run. Like I'm more worried about this thing because of how widespread it was. Like I have this joke that like, as I was saying earlier in the episode, that I went to this like Christian conservative school, and I was on Instagram swiping up during all the George Floyd stuff. And I saw girls that I knew from my school, Christian girls, talking about prison abolition. I was like, you just learned that word. You don't know what that means. And now you're a believer, and anybody who disagrees with you is a racist that believes in systematic racism. Right. And that's what's crazy to me is how quickly, and to the same degree, how quickly like Reaganite free trade Republicans became like populist mercantilists. So it's like it's both, but like obviously that kind of politics is dying out on the right wing just by age, versus this like left wing amongst the youth is definitely going to be part of the discourse for the next 20 years. And I don't see that shaking out to a different way, but I don't know how politicians, if they can usurp that movement like they did the Tea Party, would be also something to watch.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the Tea Partiers, they were organized, but they weren't quite as fiery, I think, as the Squad or whatever.
I mean, that's the problem, is that they didn't have any ideas because they were like there's weird quasi conservatarian, they like at least the very fact I can give respect for Bernie or left people is that they have like an idea or a program for everything. Like whether you like it or not, Medicare for all or the Green New Deal is a lot more substantive and a lot more voters can see that as an actual thing rather than like the weird Republican whatever their response is to healthcare, right? It's like what is it, right? Because I ultimately I don't think they're very rooted in the ideology, and then Trump has come in and made it very much so that they're not rooted in anything.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're of the leave me alone variety of conservatarian or whatever, the don't tread on me folks, that's seen as scary for the same reason that anything less government is scary. Back to the safety thing.
Right.
If you've got a politician who doesn't have a bunch of plans, then what good are they to a huge segment of the population?
Right. Exactly. That's why there's only going to be at max like a one Ron Paul, a one Justin. Like there is a hard limit on how many of those people there can be in a system, because like you have to have people that are going to be, we're going to perpetuate this, we're going to grow this, because that's what sells to someone, right? Like at this point, people would sacrifice freedom for all these kind of luxuries that a government could provide them, right? And that's the sort of the equation that a lot of Americans, I think, are having in their head. And I think it's part of the failures that the right wing has not done anything significant in terms of reform or actual positive visions of these sort of projects, right? Like privatization in a real way and actual pricing structures in medicine. I mean, and letting medicine come across the borders. I mean, Trump has, I guess, done something with the FDA and that kind of process. That's probably one of the things. The deregulatory stuff on that end has probably been the one thing.
Especially during this pandemic. I mean,
right,
who knows how many of those temporary liftings of regulations are going to become permanent, especially if he gets a second term. I mean, I think a lot of the things that Trump has done as far as deregulation goes have been on the whole good.
Right.
But
on the whole good, but this is a problem, is that, and I'm getting like flashbacks to Fox News in 2014 during the Obama era, but like it's all via executive order, right? It's like day one, this could all get reversed. So to me, it's like, sure, the short-term economic boosts in these kind of areas and industries are good, but nothing long-term change, right? As far as long-lasting bills in the Senate and the House or whatever. So the court, I guess, is going to be the real legacy of the Trump era, probably.
Yeah, for sure. And not just the Supreme Court, which they, very well could pack, but the lower courts as well. I mean, he's placed so many judges. Like, it's just that so many, had been ready to retire, who had been, put on the bench by Reagan and Bush and probably even Clinton. I mean, I don't really know, but he's had a huge impact on the courts. And, incidentally, that's kind of where libertarians and conservatives have a lot of overlap.
Right.
So
that's true.
As far as I'm concerned, that's another kind of good point of the Trump presidency. Obviously he's not my favorite person in the world, but as presidents go, I'd give him a solid C. I don't really know like what the future holds, and but I'm really, really, really optimistic that counter economics is going to play a part in that. And the reason I think that is that right now we're seeing a huge coalescing of like massive companies, and the pandemic, wiping out all the small businesses that they did, and
Right.
that will continue to be wiped out in what is undoubtedly going to be a continuing recession. That's going to leave behind the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world, but it's also going to create a lot of opportunities for people who just want to do their own little under the table, or maybe even not under the table, but opening their own Shopify store or their own butcher shop. I've got a like migrant butcher on the docket to interview. What do you think the future for counter economics, black and gray markets, and that sort of thing holds? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? Am I completely like you know a little bit more about black markets and stuff than I do.
Right.
And so I might just be completely ignorant as to the state of them prior to today. I don't even know.
I mean, definitely within, I think what's very promising is that you're sort of seeing people, one, a system is continually getting delegitimized, right? The political system, the political structure, I think both left and right, the one positive thing is that like both people know something screwy happening in Washington, right? Which can, not always, but can lead people into seeing alternatives, and usually bad alternatives, but there are some people that I think are actually thinking about, okay, what if this all breaks down? What happens, right? And what do we do? And obviously, like the lockdown is one of the craziest economic, I mean, basically like sanctioning American society as far as the lockdowns go, and how many businesses gone out of business as well, and seeing billions of dollars go to like multi-billion dollar corporations, and even some politicians own like corporations getting money and stuff. It's just, I think there's a understanding that some level the system's messed up. Even a moderate, even someone who's not really tuned in knows something's going on. Which is, from a libertarian perspective at least, is positive. But on the terms of black markets, I think it's very interesting that we're seeing people like encryption and VPNs or something that's like that kind of technology is sort of spreading. I think a lot more people are thinking about their own data and protecting it, which allows me to sort of map on is that, oh, if you can get someone to think about that, right? Encryption, and what about peer-to-peer markets? What about these kind of things? And what about cryptocurrencies? Like, if we can kind of continue down that road, we can kind of draw people into this kind of world of black markets and gray markets. But that's, I mean, again, it's like what you have when you have recessions. You're going to have people who try to get by and by other means. And those means will be proliferated and popularized, and now protected because of the internet, and protected because of encryption and all these new tools, right? That before, you had to do these deals in the dark, you had to do them in alleyway. Like, that's what's so fascinating now, is that they're digital alleyways, they're digital dark spaces. There's places where, and this is like almost to the psychology of human behavior, right? Like how a person can change when the sun is out versus when the moon's out is very interesting. And the internet allows, you can see this in porn probably most clearly, allows like the depravity of humanity, but also like sort of the unrepression of humanity, because you can come out in certain ways. And I think that includes all kind of gray markets and black markets as well.
For sure. I think, and even, as much as Facebook is just another arm of the state, I mean, Facebook Marketplace is a great place to do all kinds of gray market activity. When I was down in Dallas, I saw tamales for sale on Facebook Marketplace all the time. And there's like farmers selling their meat up here in Minnesota.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, stuff that they would technically need a license for, or some sort of regulatory permission, and they're just doing it right out in the open on Facebook Marketplace. And I mean, if they got caught, I'm sure there would be a penalty to pay, but there's so many people doing it. And even just selling your old clothes on eBay or Facebook or whatever, nobody's paying income tax on that crap.
Right.
So I mean, even if you just wanted to make a few extra bucks, and doing it just sort of as a thumbing in the nose at the state,
right,
I think it's a great way to do that kind of thing.
The marketplace is such a great point, right? Which is that the beautiful thing about the internet and a lot of these, like, again, technologies we're seeing that are emergent, that 20 years ago you had to be like a Snowden level PC engineer. You needed to know a lot of technical information how to do some of this stuff, how to have like a VPN like service. But now it's like the consumerism aspect, and this is like, regular markets coming into play of making this technology mass producible and also adoptable by the masses, right? Is that like now your grandma who knows how to operate her iPhone camera after 5 years can take photos of her, of her whatever she makes, of her products or whatever, and places on there, and then she can find sell it. Like, that's the beautiful thing about these technologies, is that now anybody can do it without even doing. And that's like the fascinating thing. And that's going to Thaddeus's argument, is that all of them were rebels against the state without even knowing it, right? Like they were the best, like as far as anarchists, they were the best like the people during World War II who were wearing zoot suits. That's like, what bigger middle finger to the state is that I'm like, you guys are rationing your stuff, and I'm over here wearing the most extravagant suit possible with the most, like, I'm like, that's like the stuff that I'm fascinated about, is the sort of unconscious rebellion towards the state just via these kind of market or via culture, all that stuff going on.
You're rationing chickens, and I've got a big ass feather in my hat.
Right, exactly. And that's like, it's amazing.
All right, great. Well, what else? What do you have to plug? Where can people find you? Do you have anything that anybody can do for you that will make your life better?
So if you can find me, add me on Facebook. I add basically anybody that I have like 20 mutual friends. That's kind of like, to me, my libertarian journey as well, is just like adding everybody that's there. I do have an Instagram, Landry_creative. I have a website called LandrySHarmon.com. So you can find me on all those places. I'm hopefully going to post more as well.
Talk a little bit before we go. I think we've got a few minutes left, right?
Yeah. I'm good.
You wrote a really good kind of article on like art in the Nazi era or something like that. It was a while back, but
well, I have some stuff that I've been working on in the Nazi era, especially some of the degenerate art shows, which are really interesting. But the one that you might be talking about is the Soviet art with the tower. That's the article you can find on my website at LandrySHarmon.com. But yeah, so essentially I was sort of contrasting the Eiffel Tower to this sort of hypothetical tower that a famous Soviet constructivist, that's sort of the art movement he was part of, named Tatlin, and he wanted to build this sort of tower for the Comintern, right, which was the global communist organization out of Moscow and St. Petersburg, Leningrad and Stalingrad, and so that's was sort of what he was working on. And it was very interesting about like sort of what I was writing about, and you could read in the article about the Eiffel Tower being this kind of place of pleasure, right? It's like now like music comes out of it that used back then. A lot of the radio in Paris would be coming out of the Eiffel Tower. There's obviously restaurants. You see this beautiful view of of Paris from there, and that the Tatlin Tower was all for the purposes of work and for propaganda. It literally would have projectors that would project onto the cloudy night skies messages from Marx and Lenin. So that sort of, to me, talks about like the aesthetic value, right? And the aesthetic value of pleasure, that there's this puritanistic element in Marxist ideology. Certainly communism in the form of Leninism is there, and it's very inherent, and it's inherent into the art and the architecture that they wanted to build, right? Like brutalism, as much as I love concrete, like concrete's one of my favorite materials, but like brutalism is all about, again, it's like there's no pleasure to it, there's nothing to grab onto as far as aesthetically. So that's kind of contrasting the two. I've been getting into writing more often and trying to write more regularly. I have a bunch of photos I haven't even put on there, like stuff from North Korea that I kind of want to put up there. All kind of different stuff, fiction. That's still something I'm working on. You can find my Twitter and Instagram there as well at LandrySHarmon.com.
Yeah, so LandrySHarmon.com. Then I guess that's where everybody should check you out. And I encourage everyone to follow you on Twitter. And that is a wrap.
Awesome.
I think. All right. Thanks again to Landry Harmon for helping me out with this very first episode of the Urban Agorist podcast. And thank you for tuning in. Remember, you can find today's show notes and every other episode's show notes at urbanagorist.com. And we will see you on the next one.
This is the way